Today's Daf Yomi Chodesh Tov. We start Rosh Chodesh Elul, and with Kiddushin Daf Dalet. So the Talmud tells us on Dalet Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the top. It says, we had said yesterday that the pasuk V'yatza Chinam Ein Kesef is here to teach us. V'yatza Chinam Ein Kesef is to teach us this powerful idea that the father collects the betrothal money from his daughter when she's in Nara, when she's between the age of 12 and 12 and a half. So Gemara on today's Daf Yomi asks the question, is V'yatza Chinam here to teach us this idea that the father collects the Kiddushin money when he betroths his Nara? Don't we need it to teach us the following things, which we learned in the Brisa? Tanya, that what do we do with the pasuk that says V'yatza Chinam? What do we do from that pasuk? It says V'yatza Chinam Eli Mei Bagras. This teaches us that she goes free. That if she was sold as an Ama Ivriya, when she becomes 12 and a half, she goes free. When she's a Bogeres. Ein Kasef, when without any money going to the master. This teaches us that if she sold as an Ama Ivriya, she goes free when she returns the age of 12. Later on, the Gemara is going to ask the obvious question. If she goes free at 12, then why do we need to be told that she goes free at 12 and a half? She's already free. But for now, the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, if we have this pasuk teaching, we need this pasuk to teach us she goes free at 12 and 12 and a half, then why do we say it to teach us that the father collects the betrothal money of his Nara? So Ravina says, because Imkain Lemakra Ein Kasef. My Ein Kasef Adon Zeh, but Yesh Kasef Adon Acher. So Ravina says that the pasuk needs to be darshan because it says the word Ein Kasef with a yud, and Ein Kasef could have been written without the yud. So from the fact that it says Ein Kasef with a yud, this teaches us the fundamental idea, the fundamental concept that there is no money to this master, but there was money to an earlier master, i.e. the father who collected the Kiddushin money. So the Gemara says, how do we know that we're supposed to expound the extra yud in the word ain? How do we know that we're supposed to expound that? And the Gemara says, I'll prove it to you from a Brisa, the Tanya V'zera Ein La. It says that here we're now talking about the following situation. If there's a Kohen who has a daughter, his daughter can eat from the food of his household and the sacred food. That's called truma. But when this daughter gets married to a Yisrael, she can't eat from the truma. Let's say the marriage with Yisrael terminates, she goes back to her father's home. Then can she eat from the truma? So now it depends. If she has no children from the Yisrael, she can go back and eat the truma. And the Gemara is going to expound this price. If she has no children from Israel, she can go back and eat the truma in her father's home. Eli Ella Zara. I only know if she has no direct offspring. What about Zara? Let's say she has grandchildren. How do I know if she can go back to eat the truma in her that she can't go back? Talmud Lomar Zara Ein La. There's an extra yud in the word Ein. Ayin La. Look at her closely. If she has grandchildren, she can't eat from the truma. I only know if she has kosher children, she can't go back and eat from the truma. Let's say she has a mom, she has children who are mamzera, maybe she could go back and eat from the truma. No, look closely. The Gemara says, but wait, how can you use that verse to teach us two things? Didn't we just use that verse to teach us about grandchildren? The Gemara says, we don't need a verse to teach us that grandchildren, if she has grandchildren, she can't go back and eat the truma. Gemara tells a very powerful idea. The b'nei banim harein kabanim. Grandchildren are like children. So if she has grandchildren, then it's the equivalent of having children, and she can't go back. But within this legalistic argument, the Gemara teaches us a powerful idea that grandchildren spiritually are like children. So therefore, ki isra kra with zera apostle. So the verse is needed to teach us that if she has a child who's a mamzer, that still disqualifies her from going back to her father's home and eating truma. So we see from here that this brisa expounds the extra yud in the word ain. So that's why we know in our case also, the V'yatza Chinam Ein Kasef, that we should expound the extra yud. But the Gemara asks, Tana Gufe Minole the Darashachik. How did this Tana himself, the Tana of Vizera in law, how did he know that you could expound the extra yud in the word ein? The Tana Gufe Minole, so the Darashachik. So the Gemara says, Amri, because they stated because there are two psukim which the word ein is written without the yud. Sivmi ein Bilam, that Bilam did not want to go with us. And there it's written without the yud. And also the pasuk about Yivam, it says when during the chalitza, she says, my brother-in-law did not want to uphold the name of his brother. There they're written they're written without the yud. And here in this case, it's written with the yud. So we see from here that when we see the word ein written with the yud, we're supposed to expound it. And now the Gemara says, so we had one pasuk tells us that the father collects the Kiddushin of his Nara, and that is from the Yatzachina Mein Kesef. And we had another pasuk which we cited on yesterday's daf, which tells us from the pasuk that he sold his daughter at Bito La'amah. And that's to teach us from the fact that he could sell his daughter to be a slave, that while she's his daughter, he gets her Ma'aseh Yodel, he gets her salary that she works. So the Gemara tells us, Itzrach michtav kiddushay la'aviyah, Itzrach michtav Ma'aseh Yodel la'aviyah. The pasuk needs to tell us that the father gets the Kiddushin money, and the pasuk needs to tell us that the father gets her salary. If the Torah is just going to tell us that the father gets her betrothal money, I would have said that's only because why does he get the Kiddushin money? Because she didn't work for it. But her salary, the Katir she works for it. I might have thought that belongs to her. And if the Torah just told us that she gets her salary, I would say because if he would just told us that the father gets her salary, I would say because the Kamitzanamine, because I would say there, it's because, why does the father get her salary? Because he's supporting her. And so therefore he gets her salary of a Kedusha, but the betrothal money, the Me'alma Ka'asila, but the betrothal money, which is from external sources, Ema Didei Havi. I would say that maybe under those circumstances, since the betrothal money is coming from external sources and she's not being supported from it, I might have, so meaning to say, since the father doesn't need to support her he's taking the salary to support her, so that's hers. But the Kiddushin money is nothing to do with her support, so I might think she gets to keep it. So we need both. So the Gemara tells us, Kufa v'yatzachinam. It says in the pasuk, we said in the Bryce of yatzachinam, it says she goes free. Ewi made progress. This refers to if she's 12 and a half, she goes free if she had been sold as a slave. Ein kasef, that there's no money. Ewi made naros. This refers to the fact that if she was 12, she goes free from being an Ama Ifriyah. So the Gemara asks the obvious question. The Lichtov Rahman and Nara. So the Torah should have just told us that she goes free as a Nara. If she goes free at 12, you won't need to tell us that she goes free at 12 and a half. When she goes free at 12, for sure she goes free at 12 and a half. So Amar Rabba, so why does it need to say Bagros then? So Rabba says, yeah, because we're looking at it backwards. We see the ending. From the fact that it has a pasuk telling us she goes free at Bagros, that tells us Yatzachinam tells us that she goes free when she becomes 12 and a half. So therefore, in Kasef is teaching us that she goes free at 12. So therefore, so and where's another example where we see that, where the Torah writes both things, even though the latter one would have been sufficient, it could have just written in that case, but if we just written that case, then we wouldn't have known the former case. So we have this. So too by the case of, says the Gemara, like the case of The Eved Ivri is a Toshav and the Eved Ivri is a Sachir. Let me just stop for a moment and say, what are we referring to here? So if Cohen has a slave who's an Eved Kenani, who's a Canaanite slave, that slave is called Kinyan Kasbu. It's his acquisition, and therefore that slave can eat from the truma of the Cohen. But if the Cohen has a slave who's an Eved Ivri, who's a Hebrew slave, the Hebrew slave cannot eat from his truma, generally speaking. So now, the Talmud says there are two types of Hebrew slaves. There's a Hebrew slave who serves for 6 years, who the Talmud's going to say that refers to a Sachir, a hired worker. And there's a Toshav. The Toshav is the Hebrew slave who takes upon himself that he's not going to go free after 6 years. He's going to have his ear pierced with an awl against the wall, and he's going to want to serve until the Jubilee year. So that too, the Talmud is teaching us here, is not going to be able to eat from the Truma. As the Gemara explains now, the Tanya, Toshav, when it says in the pasuk, the Kol Zar Lo Yochal Kodesh, that anybody who's a non-Kohen cannot eat from the Truma. Toshav Kohen v'Sachir Lo Yochal Kodesh. The Toshav of the Kohen and the Sachir cannot eat Kodesh. So when the verse says Toshav, the Brisa says that refers to Zek Hanoi Kinyano, and that refers to the slave who takes upon himself to be a slave for ever, meaning up until the Jubilee year, the Eved Ivri. And Sachir, that refers to the Eved Ivri, that Kanoi Kinyan Shanam, that refers to the slave for 6 years. So the Gemara asks the obvious question, Yomar Toshav, well, just the pasuk should have just told us that the slave who's a slave forever does not eat the Truma. But well, Yomar Sachir, wouldn't need to tell us about the Sachir, we could have easily inferred it. Vani Omer, I could have said, Kanoi Kinyan Olam, well, this slave was a slave forever, he doesn't eat the Truma. Kanoi Kinyan Shanam will call Shekay, for sure the slave was only a slave for 6 years, should not eat it. And so why does it need to say it twice? So it says the Brisa, if it had just said the case of the Toshav, Hayiti Omer, Toshav Zek Kanoi Kinyan Shanam, then I might have thought when it says Toshav, that's referring to the Eved Ivri who's only a slave for 6 years. But if he's a slave forever, I might have said Ochal, that he eats it. So Ba Sachir V'limit al Toshav. So it tells us about the Sachir, tells us that the other case is teaching us about a Toshav. That he doesn't eat them for sure, the Sachir doesn't eat. But if we wouldn't have written the Sachir, we wouldn't have known that the other part of the verse is talking about the Toshav. Abaye rejects this answer of Ravina. Amarei Abaye midami. Excuse me, not Ravina, of Rabbah. Abaye questions the answer of his Rebbe Rabbah. Abaye says, midami. How can you compare the case of the Toshav and the Sachir to the case of the Bagros and the Naaros? Is a fundamental distinction. The Toshav and the Sachir are two separate people. And so therefore the Kinami Kos of Rahman, even if the Torah had written explicitly that who cannot eat the Toshav Nirtza, that the slave who had his ear pierced, Lo Yochal, cannot eat it. V'hadar Ksiv Idach, and it still would have needed to write the other one, because of a sphere Milsa the Asi B'Kal V'Chomer, because the Sachir is something that we would have only been able to learn out otherwise from a Kal V'Chomer. Most of the Asib Kal V'Chomer, Torah v'Kasav Lakra. If it's two separate people, you can't learn out. Sometimes the Torah does write it out, even though we could have been inferred it from a logical argument. So therefore, the Torah writes both in that case. But in the case of the Nar and the Bagros, it's Chad Gufahi. It's one person, and so therefore, Kinafku Abinaros, she's already left the marriage when it comes. She's already left the status of Amma Ivrio when she's a Nara. It's impossible for her to be a Bogeres. Bagros, my Boigabe. Why is she still with him? So Abai says two fundamentally different answers, two fundamentally different cases. One is two separate people. So sometimes the Torah writes it to tell us about both. But one is the same person. So she's released as a Nara. For sure, she's not going to be there as a Bogeres. So the Gemara says, Ela Marbayo Nitzracha Ela Vager da Ilonis. So therefore, Abaye says, no, what we're talking about is there is a special type of Bogeres who is still a Bogeres, who's still a slave even after she's a Nara. That's in a Bogeres da Ilonis. She never has the sign. She's an Ilonis. She never demonstrates the signs of puberty. So then when she becomes 20, we're going to release her. Even though the Rishonim say, well, what about the fact that she served for 6 years? She should have been released for that reason. So the commentaries give different answers, but one answer is that they didn't realize she was older, so they sold her at an older age. So, but anyway, you might have thought Benaros Tepuk, Bebagros Lo Tepuk. That you might have thought, well, if she's an islander, she goes free at the age of Nara. She would go free if she's a Nara, but she wouldn't go free if she's a Bogeres. And so therefore, since she doesn't have the status of Narus, she doesn't go free from Bagros because she never went through the adolescence. So Kamash Mon, we say no, she would go free when she reaches the age of 20 under those circumstances. So the Gemara says, so Maskef or Mar Baravashi. So Mar Baravashi says, but anyway, Mar Baravashi is going to challenge this idea. That's to teach us that an islandess goes free when she's a Bogeres. So he challenged that. Shouldn't we have known this from a Kavachomer? Shouldn't we have known from a Kavachomer that she would go free? Because just like the signs of adolescence, which they don't release her from her father's domain, meaning to say, well, she's still in Nara, the father still has power over her, but they do take her out of the domain of her master. But Bagros, but when she's an adult, the father has no responsibility over her when she's a 12-and-a-half-year-old girl. For sure should take her out of the status of her master. So therefore, Mar Baravashi rejects this answer of Abaye because he says we could have learned it from a Kavachomer, even about a Bulgarian islandess. Excuse me. So therefore, it says Mar Baravashi. It's to teach us the main fundamental concept of that fact that an islandess is to teach us this fundamental idea that an islandess can be sold, meaning to say that a father is able to sell his daughter as an islandess for a Hebrew slave. It's to teach us that fundamental idea. Because Sakadaita Chamina, the Asiya Simani Narus, you might have thought, when can the father sell her? Only if she has the signs of Narus, Ave Zabina. That's when she can be sold. The Asiya Simani Narus, or Ave Zabina. But if she doesn't have the signs of Narus, she can't be sold. Kamash Malan. So it's teaching us in the pasuk, the Yatzachina is teaching us that also an islandess who goes out with Bagris alone, she also could be sold as an Amma Ivriya. So we're on the top of Dalad Amma Beis. So the Gemara says, well, Mar Baravashi, the Amar Vuhav called B'chomer, who, according to Mar Baravashi, said that you can learn how to buy Bulgarian islandess goes free when she's an adult. So if that's the case, Amrina, why is that a question on a bite? Why is he say that's a question on a bite? Didn't we just say that the Torah sometimes writes things even though you could have derived it from a Kavachomer? So the Gemara says, yeah, but that answer is the last resort. But if you could have given a different explanation for it, then Meshanina, and here we have a different explanation for why it says Bulgaris. It teaches that an islandess herself could be sold. Gemara we had said earlier that there was, what's the source that a woman could be betrothed through money? The earlier source was the Yatzachinam in Kasef, that she could be betrothed. That's what Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav. That says that the source is Yatzachinam in Kasef. But now the Gemara is going to bring a different source. Tana brings a different source. When a man marries a woman, and he's with her, but it says there in that pasuk, kiyikach, and the word kicha means bekesef. The word kicha means he marries her with money. How do we know that the word kicha means he betroths her with money? That I took the money of the field, take from me. That's by Ephraim and Avraham. That he spoke. That Avraham said to Ephraim, "Take the field from me. Take the money from me. So the Gemara asked the question: why do we need to learn it out from the pasuk of Kiyikach? Why don't we learn it out from a Kavachomer or Ma'ama Ivriya? Just like a Hebrew slave, She'ina Niknes B'Bia. She cannot be betrothed with Bia, but she's Niknes B'Kesef. But she is bought as a slave with money. Zu She'Niknes B'Bia. This girl who is able to be nicknamed with bia, for sure. Since she could be nicknamed with bia, for sure she should be able to be changed her status to be married with money. So why do we need a pasuk of kiyikav? So the Gemara says, well, no, because you can't learn out of kal v'chomer from bia from you can't learn out of kal v'chomer from the fact that she could be konef with bia from the Amma Ivriya, because the Yavama Tochiach, because the case of a Yavama, a woman who falls to whatever marriage with her brother-in-law should prove it. She nicknames with Bia. She is acquired with Bia. The Ina nicknames B'Kesev. She is acquired with Bia, the Yavama, but she's not able to be acquired with money. She's not able to change her status with money. So therefore, we see that just because you could change your status with Bia doesn't mean you could change it with money. Yeah, but Ma'ala Yavama Shekain a nicknames B'Shtar. Tomar Bazushin nicknames B'Shtar. So the Talmud asked the question, but why are you going to prove it from a Yavama? So you can't prove it from this Kal V'chomer is broken because the Yavama is not able to become married with a contract. So you're going to prove from a Yavama to a regular woman. Tomar Bazushin nicknames B'Shtar. She is able to become married with a contract, and so therefore, if that's the case, you can't. The Bryce, the Kal V'chomer is broken, and so therefore we need the pasuk. So Talmud Omar ki yikach ish. Therefore, we need the pasuk to tell us that she becomes betrothed with money. So Gemara says, "How lamali kraba? Why does the Bryce conclude that you need a pasuk or osculate? Didn't we just say towards the end of the Bryce that there's no question on the Kal V'chomer because the woman herself can be betrothed with money, with a contract, unlike the Yavama. So Amar Rav Ashi, so Rav Ashi explains, Mishum De'iko Meimar, Meikar the Dina Pircha. You could have said that it's breaking the Kal V'chomer at its foundation, because we could have said, what's the source of the Kal V'chomer? Me'ama Ivriya, from the Hebrew maid slave. But we said, Ma'ala Ama Ivriya, Shekin Yotze B'Kesef. The Amma Ivriya is totally different because she goes out with money. She leaves the status as a slave with money. Tomar Bezusha and Yotze B'Kesef. But this woman does not leave the relationship with money. So therefore it says, Tamomar ki yikach ish. So now the Gemara says, V'itzracham nechtav biyad zachinam. V'itzracham nechtav ki yikach ish. We need a pasuk to tell us that she goes. We need the pasuk to tell us, one pasuk to tell us that she can be betrothed with money, and we need another pasuk to tell us she can be betrothed with money. If we just had the pasuk of this brisa that she's betrothed with money, Kiddushin I might have thought that she gets to keep the money herself. The money that her husband gives her is hers. So pasuk Rachmana biyad zachinam. So therefore, the pasuk tells us biyad zachinam to tell us that the money goes to her father in that case. Because of Rachmana yad zachinam, and if the pasuk just told us biyad zachinam, ava mina echadiyava ihi ledidei, I might have thought, well, let's say she gives the money to her husband, Vikidashto, and she betroths him. I might have thought, Vikidushe, I might have thought it's a valid Kiddushin. Because of Rachmana, Ki Yikach, Velo Ki Sikach. So therefore the pasuk tells us Ki Yikach, when he gives the money, when he takes her, but now when she takes him, if she gives him the money, it's not a betrothal. We're going to see later on, a couple of days, the Dapim talks about how it's possible she can betroth him by giving money, but that's because she's still giving him something of value. So the Gemara says, how do we know that she's able to become betrothed through Bia? Well, it's based upon the fact that the pasuk says Uve'ala. It says in the pasuk, Yikach ish isha uve'ala, when a man takes a wife and he's with her, this teaches us that she's betrothed through Bia. And the Gemara says, but why do we need a pasuk? Isn't it a Kal V'chomer? Just like Yavama she nicknames because she's not betrothed with money, but nicknames with Bia, but she is betrothed with Bia. So she nicknames B'Kesef. This woman who is betrothed with money, the regular woman, ain't no din she nicknames with Bia. For sure, should be able to be married with Bia. So the Gemara says, no, we can't make that Kal V'chomer because Ama Avriya Tochiach. Because Ama Avriya proves the opposite. She niknes bekesef. She is betrothed with money. They niknes bebia, but she's not betrothed with bia. So the Gemara said, no, because the Ama Avriya case is different. Ama Avriya she'in kanina shem ishus. You can't prove anything from the Ama Avriya because that's not from the perspective of marriage. That's a slave. Tomar Bazusha kanino shem ishus. So we're going to learn from here to the Shekinyano Shamisut. So we're going to learn to the case of a regular woman who is betrothed for the purpose of Ishus, of marriage. Tamalomar or Be'alah. So it says if the man is with her with Be'alah to teach us that you could be betrothed through Bia. The Gemara says, but didn't we just reject the breaking of the Kal V'chomer? So why do we still need the verse? Because you might have said that there's a question on the source of the Kal V'chomer, on the source of the breaking of the Kal V'chomer. What's our source for the Kal V'chomer? We want to prove a Kal V'chomer for Bia from a Yibum, but Mali Yavama Shekain Zikuka V'omedes. A Yavama is Zikuka V'omedes, meaning to say she's already partially betrothed. So since she's already partially betrothed, we might think that Bia works. Tomar Bazu, but you can't say that by a regular woman. Shein Zikuka V'omedes. You might have thought you could say it by Yavama because she's already partially betrothed, but not by a regular woman. She's not already partially betrothed. So therefore, Tamalomar Uve'Allah is to tell us Uve'Allah that the Bia is able to be betrothed. Okay, a Chodesh Tov to everybody. Chodesh Tov. Just want to say the schedule.